Today we're going to dive into one of the most mysterious paintings in human history, a work studied by scholars, theologians, art historians, and conspiracy theorists alike. And the more they studied it, the more secrets they uncovered. Of course, we're talking about The Last Supper by Leonardo da Vinci, a masterpiece hidden on a wall of the Santa Maria delle Grazie monastery in Milan for over 500 years. But there is something in this painting that very few people know. Not a simple hidden symbol, not an accidental artistic decision, but a key that completely changes how the scene and Leonardo's intention should be understood. Today we will analyze the painting in detail. Every group, every gesture, every object on the table, the historical context, and all of the unexpected details that most viewers never notice. This isn't just an art breakdown. It's a journey into the mind of a man who saw the world differently and left behind a message, one that only a few have ever truly read. To understand the secret, we need to understand how The Last Supper was created. Leonardo did not paint a traditional fresco. He used an experimental technique, essentially oil and tempera on a dry wall, not wet plaster. Because of this, the painting began to deteriorate just a few years after completion. But da Vinci did this deliberately. He wanted the freedom to work slowly, to revise, to rework every gesture like a frame in a film. He painted it between 1495 and 1498, commissioned by Duke Ludovico Sforza. But the Duke expected a traditional, static, almost icon-like depiction. Instead, Leonardo did the opposite. He turned the biblical line, "One of you will betray me," into an emotional explosion frozen in time. Every apostle reacts differently, and their reactions are the key to understanding the hidden meaning. Remember this point. We'll return to it later. From a distance, the painting appears incredibly symmetrical. Christ sits at the center. His figure forms a triangle, a symbol of stability, divinity, and harmony. But around him, a storm of emotion. Leonardo arranged the apostles in groups of three, the number of the Holy Trinity, and a mathematical principle of harmony Leonardo used throughout his work. The groups are arranged as follows. To Christ's left, Bartholomew, James the Lesser, Andrew, Judas Iscariot, Peter, John. To Christ's right, Thomas, James the Greater, Philip, Matthew, Jude, Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot. But why these specific triads? Why is Christ so calm, as if he knows more than he says? And why do all lines of perspective converge precisely at his head? These questions lead us to the next block. Motion in the painting. How Leonardo created cinema in the 1490s. There is something most people, even many art historians, don't fully grasp. The Last Supper is not a static image. It is animation stretched into space. Leonardo was obsessed with movement. He observed human gestures, recorded micro-reactions in stressful situations, studied muscles, and analyzed how emotions shape the body. Here, he created a sound wave visualized in gestures. The words of Christ form the epicenter. The nearest apostles react first, then the reaction spreads outward. The furthest groups seem to hear the news with a slight delay. This isn't just composition, it's almost frame-by-frame cinematography. Shock, reasoning, debate, confusion, fear, philosophical acceptance. Imagine pressing play. Christ speaks the line, and a wave of emotion moves from the center to the edges. This method of expressing time in a static painting was revolutionary. Here it is, the little-known fact that turns the entire interpretation of the painting upside down. Leonardo combined two different biblical moments into one scene. Not just the moment when Jesus says, "One of you will betray me," but also another moment that happens only seconds later. The identification of the betrayer. This means the painting is not a single instant. It is a continuum, a layered moment where multiple events happen simultaneously. That's why the gestures seem contradictory. Some apostles are reacting to the words, others are already reacting to Judas reaching for the dish. And Christ at the center exists outside of time. He is the fixed point, while the moment expands outward like a shockwave. Now let's break down each group. Bartholomew, James the Lesser Andrew. This group is located on the far left from the viewer's perspective. The outermost trio, Bartholomew. He rises slightly from his seat, leaning forward on the table. His body is tense. He's trying to hear, to understand. James the Lesser. James stretches his arms toward Christ, as if asking, "How can this be?" Leonardo places him in partial shadow, emphasizing his confusion and inner struggle. Andrew raises both hands in a defensive gesture, palms outward, as if rejecting the possibility of betrayal. He is closest to the viewer, making his emotional reaction more vivid. This group represents the initial shock, the first seconds after Christ's words. The system of gestures, a language. Leonardo invented gestures are the key to understanding the painting. Leonardo wrote in his treatise on painting, "Every gesture must be justified by the movement of the soul." And indeed, in The Last Supper, no hand, posture, or tilt of the head is random. For example, Andrew's raised hands, the gesture of denial, Philip's hands pressed to his chest, searching for guilt, Thomas's lifted finger, doubt, foreshadowing his future disbelief, John's leaning posture, acceptance and calm, Judas's hunched shoulders, the weight of secrecy, James the Greater's wide gesture, emotional outburst. But few notice that these gestures form a hidden rhythm, almost musical. If each gesture were a musical note, the entire composition would form a choral progression of reactions. Leonardo, after all, was a musician. It is likely he built the painting using the same principles of harmony that create music. Oh, Judas, Peter, John. This group sits immediately to Christ's left, forming the heart of the tension. Judas Iscariot. Judas leans slightly backward, pushed into the depth of the scene. Leonardo separates him from the others, visually and symbolically. He contains three important details. He holds a small bag, the silver for betraying Christ. His hand reaches toward the same dish as Christ's, the biblical revelation of the betrayer. His face is partly in shadow, unlike most other apostles. He also accidentally overturns a salt cellar, a medieval symbol of misfortune. Peter. Peter leans toward John and holds a knife in his hand. He is not threatening Judas directly. He is questioning John intensely. The knife foreshadows his future act in Gethsemane when he cuts off the servant's ear. Most viewers overlook that the knife is positioned behind Judas, creating a sense of danger around him. John. Traditionally shown young and gentle, John sits leaning away from Judas and toward Peter. He looks calmer than the others, and this matters when we talk about the painting's time layers. This trio forms a dramatic triangle. Christ, Judas, Peter, the three central figures of the unfolding tragedy. Now the central figure, Christ, sits in absolute calm. His hands are open, the left toward the bread, the right toward the wine. These gestures signify the Eucharist, the prophecy, and acceptance. Behind him is a window, and beyond it, clear light. The window forms a natural halo, even though Leonardo refused to paint an actual nimbus. Every perspective line, the walls, ceiling, table, windows, converges directly at Christ's head. He becomes the literal and symbolic center of the universe. His face shows not fear or anger, but quiet acceptance. At this moment, he already knows the betrayal is happening. His hand moves toward the dish at the same moment as Judas's. The architecture of the room, a mathematical code. At first glance, the room looks like any simple dining hall, but this is an illusion. The architecture follows the proportions of the golden ratio and strict linear perspective, which Leonardo mastered with absolute precision. The lines of the ceiling beams, windows, walls, and tablecloth create a mathematically perfect space. This space is not just background. It forms a virtual extension of the real monastery hall. When you stand in front of the mural, you are effectively standing in the same room as Christ and the apostles. Leonardo designed the viewer to become an invisible participant. There's another subtle trick. The perspective converges, but parallel lines slightly widen at the edges. This creates a breathing room effect. The space feels deeper than it actually is. Leonardo used this to give Christ an infinite horizon behind him, as if the sky opens only behind that central figure. Thomas, James the Greater, Philip, this trio sits to Christ's right. Thomas raises his index finger. This becomes his iconic gesture. He is the apostle who later doubts the resurrection and demands to see the wounds. James the Greater. He spreads his arms wide in exclamation. His heavy robes emphasize the emotional weight he carries. Philip leans toward Christ with hands pressed to his chest. He expresses genuine concern. Lord, is it me? He is one of the few whose attention is directed only toward Christ. Matthew, Thaddeus, Simon, the far-right trio. Matthew turns toward his companions, gesturing intensely. He is processing the words and seeking clarity. Jude Thaddeus. He also looks toward Simon, almost interrogating him. This shows the chain reaction. Christ's words, nearby apostles, distant apostles, Simon the Zealot. Simon sits dignified and calm, like a philosopher. He is the oldest apostle, and Leonardo portrays him as someone who analyzes rather than reacts emotionally. Psychological archetypes. Who Leonardo was really painting. There is a theory, supported by many scholars, that the apostles here are not simply portraits. They are psychological archetypes, embodiments of different human reactions to truth. Each trio represents a universal behavioral pattern: the barrier of denial, Bartholomew, James the Lesser, Andrew, the core of conflict, Judas, Peter, John, the spiritual debate, Thomas, James the Greater, Philip, the social discussion, Matthew, Thaddeus, Simon. If you strip away the religious context, this is a scene straight out of human psychology. A room where 12 people react differently to a difficult truth. Leonardo creates a miniature model of society, and he places the viewer right inside it. Every viewer inevitably recognizes themselves in at least one apostle. The table is filled with meaningful details. Bread, 3 large pieces, a symbol of the Trinity. Wine, foreshadowing Christ's blood. Fish, the early Christian symbol. Ichthus, citrus fruits, a sign of Mediterranean culture. And sforza, wealth, the overturned salt cellar before Judas. Knives, plates, pitchers, jugs. Notably absent is the paschal lamb, which traditionally appears in depictions of the Last Supper. Leonardo intentionally removes it, replacing it with symbolic bread and wine. Clothing colors: Christ, red and blue, the divine and the human. Judas, green and blue, earthly tones. Peter, orange, fire and passion. John, pink, purity and youth. Light enters from the left side, from the viewer's direction. The background windows open onto calm blue sky, heavenly perspective. Why there are no halos or sacred attributes. In Renaissance art, halos were almost always present in depictions of holy figures. But Leonardo made a radical choice. He removed every halo. Why? Because he wanted to show, not a supernatural event, but a human drama. Christ is a man among men. He sits in an ordinary room. surrounded by ordinary people. Leonardo intentionally makes the scene realistic, grounding it in everyday reality. He wants the viewer to feel this could have happened right here, in front of us. This is why The Last Supper still feels modern, even after 5 centuries. Now that we've explored everything, we can reveal the deeper secret. Leonardo painted not just an event, but humanity's reaction to truth. His painting studies emotion, fear, denial, doubt, anger, confusion, faith, acceptance. Christ is the unmoving center. The disciples are reflections of us. The secret isn't simply that Judas is the betrayer, or who sits where, or any conspiracy theory. The secret is that Leonardo painted the fracture between human time and divine time. For the apostles, this moment is chaos. For Christ, it is fulfillment. Leonardo depicted both layers at once, a human shockwave surrounding divine serenity. The Last Supper is not just a painting. It is Leonardo's code, a book written with gestures, light, mathematics, and emotion. Each time we look at it, we notice something new. And that is Leonardo's genius. He created a work that lives as long as humanity keeps asking questions. If you enjoyed uncovering these secrets with me, don't forget to like, subscribe, and meet me in the next journey into the world of great artistic mysteries.